With Spear and Dagger, some of you may be wondering what's better, to go with Brutal Fury or to have Explosive Fury. So in this video, I want to cover the benefits of both and which is actually better for dealing more damage. You may have been getting conflicting information. Some people say Brutal Fury is better. Other people are saying, myself included, that Explosive Fury can be better. And ultimately, which one is best? Let's have a look at a breakdown of the math. You can see exactly how much damage the abilities will deal based on just a percentage plus the base damage, and then looking at the hit count. So Explosive Fury in this example is 5 hits of 360 base damage plus 100, and that is also boosted by 40% against monsters. But then if you look at Brutal Fury, when you use that specialization, this becomes 180% of base damage plus 50, 5 times, and then you can actually use this ability 3 times when you use this specialization. You will use it 2 times when you get 5 burst stacks in your target, and you'll use it a 3rd time if you get like shock on your boss, which means you're going to have to use Abyssal Cleave before it to apply that shock to be able to use that 3 times. That means this can be a 15 hit attack, but without the shock it's only a 10 hit attack. So it's very simple to just compare the two based on that percentage and the base damage and then the hit count. In this example, you can see Explosive Fury would deal just over 20,000 damage. Now because we're doing multiple hits, and with Spear and Dagger we can combine that with say Umbral Spirit, and Explosive Fury allows us to then use Javelin Inferno 5 times as well. So again, in this example, you can get upwards of nearly 34,000 total damage. If we compare that versus Brutal Fury, where you would use say Fatal Stigma as that second skill, you get about 26,000 damage. So you can see between the two, yeah, Explosive Fury would clearly be better. But this is taking into account Brutal Fury only getting 10 hits, meaning you would only use that ability twice, which is normally all you can do when you don't have Abyssal Cleave, that shock effect on your target. And even to get 10 hits, 2 casts, you have to put 5 burst stacks on your target. So you're going to have to cast say your Gale and your Culling Arc. We'll do that just here, and you can see you get those 5 burst stacks, and now you're able to use Brutal Fury twice. You can see, use it once and then twice. However, you can use it a 3rd time, but you have to use Abyssal Cleave before it. And that is somewhat limiting because it's got a 20-second cooldown. So again, you'll get the burst stacks on your target here, then you'll use your Abyssal Cleave, and then you can use your Brutal Fury 3 times. And that definitely results in more damage. 15 more hits, you can trigger Umbral Spirit more, and the combined total damage would go up to over 36,000, which compared to Explosive Fury is about, in this example, a 3,000 damage increase, which is about an 8% damage difference. So yes, in a burst case scenario where you can put Abyssal Cleave on your target before you use Brutal Fury, your Brutal Fury can perform better. So in some situations, particularly Gate of Infinity, particularly with short completion times, Brutal Fury will be better. And if you're wondering why I combine it with say Fatal Stigma, not some other skill, that's because out of all of these, it's going to be the best performing one, and in general you already want to be using Blood Leech Aura. And some people are scoffing at the fact that I'm saying Blood Leech Aura is good, and you can see it actually is here. And a big reason is because your base damage, if you compare the Dagger's maximum 270, Spear is going to be a lot higher at like 515. And so your Spear skills will do like twice as much damage as your Dagger skills will. So that damage over time, combined with even Umbral Spirit, will result overall in more damage. So you use that one anyway. And then compared versus the others, you could potentially use Javelin Surge. Can be a useful option, but I found you can't really take advantage of the brand effect so well because this cast time is just too long, and if you use it in the middle of your rotation, you're sacrificing the extra damage boost you would gain by the uptime of Umbral Spirit, your poisons, and it can just end up not worth it. But of course, if you're in Gate of Infinity, you can charge it up as the first thing you do as your attack. It can be viable. Using Gate of Infinity here as a testing ground to maximize your damage output is okay in some situations when you have bosses that you can't just cheese the mechanics. A lot of the case these days, Gate of Infinity is pretty much how can you abuse them to just exploit the mechanics with, say, stuns, positioning, and ultimately just cheesing the fight, rather than actually dealing good damage. You may see, say, a great sword and spear doing super well on some of them because they can pretty much just stun lock the boss from the very beginning. They end up with like no defensiveness and do no mechanics, and you can kill them within 5 seconds versus, say, some other weapon combination which can't perform a stun lock is not going to be able to perform it within that duration. So honestly, Gate of Infinity right now is a pretty terrible place to actually test your damage. But if we want to look at an ideal rotation then with, say, Brutal Fury, because you want to take advantage of this extra, say, 8% more damage difference in burst case scenarios, you can see this is what I would go with. And I can confirm the entire rotation is a bit more damage. For example, this rotation here was 305,000 damage on the boss versus my Explosive Fury rotation was 292,000 damage on the boss. So there is that little bit of a damage difference, and it's noticeable. You can have a look at the difference of the hit points on the dummy from the beginning to the end as of now, and you will see that 305,000 damage difference. But you can see the rotation is very similar. However, we need to change Abyssal Cleave and add in Fatal Stigma, and we no longer have Javelin Inferno at the end. You still want the Inject Venom, the Sentinel's Bastion, the Umbral Spirit, Bloodleech Aura, Gale, Calling Arc, Cleaving Moonlight, Fatal and Stigma, and then the Abyssal Cleave, you can use it before you use Phoenix Barrage to give it that critical cleave effect. There's not much point using Abyssal Cleave just before you use Brutal Fury, because only the first attacks, the first 5 hits, are going to be boosted by this and not, say, the following 10 attacks. So it's better to just improve Phoenix Barrage with that critical cleave, and the shock duration on your boss should last more than enough time to get all 3 hits of Brutal Fury out. And so again, that's the entire rotation, and that's versus the Explosive Fury rotation right here that you would use, where you can then use Javelin Inferno at the end. And keep in mind, the only way to actually get 3 casts of Brutal Fury is the requirement of having Abyssal Cleave cast, which has a 27-second cooldown. So depending on your group you're in, you might not have enough cooldown to be able to actually take advantage of that very often. So it can be better having Explosive Fury, where you can use that still 5 times while there's a bit of downtime and be able to have better sustained damage. Because you can see Explosive Fury or Brutal Fury only have like nearly a 12-second cooldown, so you can use this like at least twice before Abyssal Cleave is off cooldown. So if you have Brutal Fury, you'll only get 2 casts of that when you don't have Abyssal Cleave up, versus always having the ability to cast Explosive Fury 5 times. But if you have bow users who put Deadly Marker on the boss, then there's generally no problem to perform these full rotations back to back, meaning yes, the burst rotation can be a little bit better. But I'd also keep in mind, if you have mobs to kill, like groups of enemies, having this setup with Explosive Fury and Javelin Inferno is just huge. The amount of multi-target damage you gain from these 2 skills is just insane. And when you're on your burst rotation build, you miss that. Like, Brutal and Fury is still a little bit of multi-target, but you don't have the Javelin Inferno. The only way to actually make use of Javelin Inferno is by getting Ember stacks, which you then have to have Explosive Fury to gain. So if you want a 1 build setup, then absolutely go with these abilities with Explosive Fury and Javelin Inferno. I explained it more in depth in my previous video, and yes, these are the specializations, and for single target on bosses this would be your rotation. But again, min-maxing a little bit more for burst case scenarios, Brutal and Fury can be a little bit better with, say, this damage rotation. And overall, I hope that helps to compare both of those, and why you will find, yes, people claiming that Brutal Fury is better. In specific burst case scenarios, it can be. It's just heavily reliant on having Abyssal Cleave to actually be able to cast this 3 times. If you can only cast it twice, then it's significantly worse than just Explosive Fury, a whopping 23% worse. So it's definitely not as good for sustained damage if you don't have deadly markers from bow users in your group. Ultimately, thanks for watching. A special thank you to all these channel members, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.